Hello, good evening. Good evening. Welcome here on South TV. This is Monica Kunzeko Guta. Today we are talking about intergenerational relationships. And I have got Reverend TJ Maforo and Lee Dinket Lee Madzinga. It's so good to have you here.
Oh, it's
I
good to be
have
here.
Thank you.
looking forward to this discussion, and so I'm going to give this opportunity to Reverend Maforo to introduce yourself and greet your audience.
Well, thank you, Monica, and what a wonderful time for us to be together here and to delve into this very, very engaging, interesting, hopefully, uh, subject. There is a real purpose for us to do this, so I'm looking forward to be in discussion with Lee. Okay, I'm Jacob Maforo. I'm a pastor in the United Methodist Church, and I'm based in small town Kansas, small town America, and I would like to bring a perspective of an adult, a parent, on this conversation. And where possible, I'll give the pastor's perspective. So over to you, Lee.
Yes. So my perspective will largely be from the perspective of somebody who grew up here in North America as a child in the diaspora. Um, I'll go ahead and say right now, please forgive me if I happen to say uncle instead of reverend.
Let's
Yeah,
hear how
or
it goes.
yes. So please forgive me. Because this is an interesting conversation because it is an intergenerational conversation, but it's also one that we'll be having publicly with you guys. But it's also an actual intergenerational conversation happening between my uncle and myself. So it's very interesting, and I'm very excited to be a part of this discussion.
I am too.
Very cool. So Reverend Maforo, take it away.
Well, thank you. I will. I will. Let's see. I think that what I wanted to do here is that start by saying, what are we talking about? We are talking about intergenerational relationships. There's many ways. There's book definitions and whatever. I think for our context here is we are talking about relationships between people of different generations, different ages. So relationship between parents, maybe, or adults, and that can be between adults and their children, or adults and younger people. Also, maybe for it might extend also to ages of grandchildren. I think that there are people, and I will give from the onset, I will say that we are focusing on the diaspora. So, we will get into details, but some people have become grandparents in the diaspora. So they have a three-layered conversation or engagement there between themselves, children they have raised, and then grandchildren, like I am saying. So I don't know, Lee, if you would want to bring your perspective.
Yes, I think that's a very interesting point that grandchildren. Um, I always like to, when this conversation starts, to bring up that when we talk about children, because often the parents are people who were raised in Zimbabwe, grew up in Zimbabwe, and have moved here, have immigrated to the diaspora. But when we talk about children, that we need to make a distinction between
Yeah.
those who were born in Zimbabwe and raised in North America or the diaspora, wherever you may be. Those who were born in those who were born in North America and raised in North America. And then you also have those who were, those were born in Zimbabwe and raised in North America. Those were born in Zimbabwe, raised in Zimbabwe. Then there are those who moved in a later stage of their life, who had already developed socially. And the reason why that distinction is important is because all of these people see the world and view the world in a different way. They also view their parents in a quite different way. And my perspective is one that's kind of weird, but it's kind of mixed, which can be interesting, right? Because although I was born in Zimbabwe, I have been socialized in North America. You can hear by the way I speak, obviously.
How old were you when you moved to North America?
I was 5 years old, I believe, when I moved to North America. So
that was pretty young.
Yes. So I sound American. I would say my mannerisms are quite American. When I say, I mean, I live in Canada now. When I say American, I mean North American. But the basis of who I am, the way I was taught and the way I grew up, were Zimbabwean parents. My first language wasn't English, right? So all those dynamics change who you are and the way you view the world.
So that's your perspective, and I'll add mine in the sense that I have 3 children. One was about the same age you were when you migrated, and the other 2 born and raised in North America, and the youngest one now starting college, what we call freshman, right? And you have talked about something very interesting and significant here, that the formative process for you is a mixture of both, which means your formative language was not English, but because you came at that tender and young age, you have been socialized into and through the English language, correct?
Yeah, and even language, I would say language is very important, of course, and it encompasses quite a lot. But I would say culture more than anything. When you're at home, your parents teach you to act a certain way. They give you a value system. They teach you how to walk around the world and how the world perceives you. But when you go out into the world, you end up, that's where you really create the person you are, right? And a lot of the conflict that happens when we say between generations is because of a misunderstanding. You have people who are raised in Zimbabwe trying to understand somebody who is raised in America, socialized in America or the diaspora. And those are very 2 different mindsets. So it's really about understanding each other. And I feel like that's where the breakdown is most of the time.
What would you say? And you interact with many peers of your age who are either in the same situation and circumstance as you are, or slightly different, using the 3 different descriptions you gave. From your interactions, what do you hear from? What do you hear as the major areas of conflict?
I feel like it's the main area of conflict that I would say, and it kind of encompasses most issues, is they don't understand who I am.
When When you say
They'll be talking about their parents.
you mean the parents who have migrated?
Yes, a lot of children will say they don't understand who I am, right? And from that is coming from a child's perspective, of course, right? Because when I speak to my friends, and I feel like it doesn't have to be that way. I feel like a lot of it is honestly because we're afraid to speak, and some of it is cultural, right? Our culture, Zimbabwean culture, teaches you that your parents are really there to form you, to create you, to make you who you are. But a lot of our parents grew up without having the kind of relationships we have with our parents. The reason we have those relationships is because the society we now live in requires parents to be far closer to their children so their children aren't affected by too many things outside. So I think when that breaks down, the effects are children will end up finding someone out there or something out there that will form them. And that can be dangerous, of course. So it's important for us to have these dialogues that our parents are not comfortable having because they were not comfortable having that dialogue with their parents, right? But it's something we need to, both sides need to actually understand each other and be able to speak freely to each other. And that can be difficult, but it's something that needs to be learned on both sides. A child can't simply say, my parent doesn't understand me. Well, have you tried to explain to them how you feel, how you see the world?
Communication is two-way, right?
Yeah.
And communication is two-way. It includes the language effects you are talking about, which includes the body language, which includes everything. In fact, for a parent like me who was born and raised in Zimbabwe, if I asked a child who has grown up in this new environment, and I said, maybe it's about going out to eat, and I say, where do you want us to go to eat? And they say, I don't care. When they say, I don't care, for me, that's an issue of language there, because that sounds like something I would not have said to my parent. I would never have said whatever, and therefore we have different expectations. So my question, and it sounds like a pushback, that these parents who have raised someone and socialized them through the whole value system of that family, and then all of a sudden the child says, they don't understand me. Would you understand pushing back on the younger people? Would you understand that?
Yes, but here's what I would say. When we as children, when we pick up on certain mannerisms and certain things that we see around us, it's a way of us trying to live efficiently within the world that we have to interact with, right? It's not us trying to fight our parents. It is us actually trying to become, unuseful isn't the word, us trying to become responsible members of society. Because when you hear me speak, right?
Yeah.
I sound North American.
Correct.
But I grew up in a home where my parents, they spoke in Shona, right? Yeah. And I grew up in a home where my parents, they have, people here would say they have very obvious accents. And they're like, oh, well, where's my accent? Well, my accent isn't there because for me to live in the society that I have to grow up in, whether I want to or not, I find ways to become a more efficient member of society. right?
Yeah.
So a lot of it, when kids say, my parents don't understand me, it's because even though our parents give us a value system, that there I agree with you. Our parents do give us a very strong value system. And if you raised a good child, you raised a good child. But at the same time, the world molds us more than we mold the world around us. Right? So it's
So
when the world is molding us, it's important for us to assimilation gets a bad rap. Like people, when they hear the word assimilate,
yeah.
they think of it as a bad thing. But what it is
In another
you're trying
language,
to be, yeah, right.
in another language, they call it assimilado. But
Yeah,
but you see, I think
Yeah.
that I'm beginning to come to where you are. There's a gap
Mm.
because then we are talking about how we as the migrant parents are trying to socialize you into a typical Zimbabwean or maybe Nigerian or whatever, but we interact with you the time you are present with us. So
Yes.
the gap, maybe you are right, because the gap, I think the gap is with the parents, because the parents are not present with you at school. The parents are not present with you as you learn from other children.
Absolutely.
And that is a missing link, I think, for us as parents. And therefore, we are expecting that how we shaped our conversations last night is how you spend your day. You
Yeah.
spend your day building a new value system, correct?
Yeah. I
And
would
that
even
is,
say something. I would even say something that might seem
yeah,
a little extreme, and that
yeah,
is people like myself
yes,
who have parents who grew up in Zim, and then you go home, and then you have a certain culture that exists in your home, and then a
yeah.
certain culture that exists outside. You actually exist in two different worlds, and
Okay.
you
All right.
and your identity is two different identities. But
If you say two
yeah,
different identities,
Mhm.
are you trying to say you have an identity crisis?
No, I don't see it as crisis because I am Lee, right? And I am
Correct.
comfortable with being Lee. That took a very long time. I had to go through a lot of processing in my own mind. And I also had to go back to Zimbabwe and see, okay, who am I? Where do I come from? What does it mean to be Zimbabwean? What does it mean to and it takes a lot. And during that time I could say maybe the word crisis would be sufficient, but it is no longer sufficient because I know who I am now. I understand who I am. But when I'm at home, it's not that I am trying to be a different person than the person I am outside. It's just that I am in two different social situations, right? And it makes no sense for me to act like I do around my friends when I'm around my parents. For one, it's just disrespectful, right? So it's one of those things where
It
when
will
I
be
say
confusing for the parents.
it would be confusing, right? I'm not gonna go up to my parents and say, "Yo, what's good?" You know,
Yeah.
that wouldn't make sense.
Yeah.
But when I speak to my friends, I do speak in that way, and it's not that I have these two different identities that are fighting each other. No, it's just that my identity, who I am, is far more complex than, let's say, someone who grew up in North America as North American parents, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
So you have no identity crisis. You have embraced whom you are within the
Yeah.
North American context, but you
Mhm.
have also embraced who you are within the African context. And
Yeah.
you are comfortable with that dual definition.
Mm.
Now, for you, having been raised in this new culture that's different from your parents,
Mhm.
and then actually physically travel to the context in which your parents were raised. So, because you travel there in many ways through the Shona language that they communicate within the house, through the phone calls you hear them talking to people overseas, through any other media of communication within and then eventually being in that African environment and context.
Mhm.
And I'm not just talking about you as a person and you as a family and you with your parents, but I am saying, and because within your community, you understand that Zimbabweans or other nationalities from Africa, they form communities.
Yes.
Now tell me, you have been to Zimbabwe.
Mhm.
What do you think, if any, has changed with those parents, including yours, including me? What do you think they have lost in the process of migration? Uh, they they may try to still be the same people, but do you feel like they have lost something which their equivalents in Zimbabwe or Africa have? So would you talk to that?
Yeah, I wouldn't say
I
that.
hope I hope the question was clear for you.
Yeah, no, the question is clear. Yeah, I wouldn't say that they have lost anything. I would say that they have changed.
They've-
Um, yeah, almost with lost can kind of seem like a negative connotation word,
Yeah,
but I would say that they have changed, right? As I have assimilated into the world in which I have to live, they have also assimilated, right? You guys have to work in this environment. You're not at home all the time, right?
yeah,
You guys also have to go outside, and you have to go to the grocery store,
yeah.
right? You have to go to the bank. Um, One thing, and I hope my mother is okay with this, but one thing that we used to laugh about, my sister and I, is when we used to call my mom, because my mother used to work in a bank, and when we used to call her, I'd be like, "Who is this? Who is this person I'm talking to?" Right? Because the voice is so different. The
Okay,
voice is so different.
your voice from home,
Yeah,
from last
is
night
different
where the table
than the
is.
one that she uses at work, right? And it's just becoming comfortable in
Yeah.
your social surroundings.
Hmm.
So I wouldn't say it's something like a loss. It's more like a change, and it's a change that is necessary. Which is why before I was saying like assimilation isn't a bad thing. So
Yep.
it also has to do with let's say like raising children, right? The way parents raise their kids in Zimbabwe is different than the way they raise them in North America. Because if
Right.
you raise them the same way you do in Zimbabwe, the result of that could be catastrophic, right?
Yep.
Because they go out into a world that's quite different, and you don't want to push those kids away, right? You want to have a connection with your children. You want to have it's this different situations require us to act in different ways, and changing isn't something that is bad. It is good. As human beings, we need to change, and we need to change in different situations so that we can succeed and excel in those situations.
And and I like your observation and the example you
Mhm.
gave of your mother that your voice or what's on a voice from the bank is different
Mhm.
from the one at home. And I would also say that I do encounter the same. I am a preacher,
Mhm.
and uh, who has done also a cultural immersion. Uh, and I only get to preach to fellow Zimbabweans every once in a while, right? And well, it's getting a little bit more now with the introduction of the phone line worship services. But other than that, I would only worship with other Zimbabweans once a year. So here is the effect to that. When we come back home on a Sunday and we sit around the table, my children who are in the same place with you, they begin to correct how I pronounced.
How you pronounce things while you're preaching.
Yes, and they say, sometimes they actually go as far as say, "Who says that?" Because it sounded totally not right for them, and they help me to go through that change process. They participate in that change process. So that leads us, therefore, to then say, so we can be mutual. This change process can be mutually beneficial to people of the different age. Like we said at the beginning, some people have moved on from having the 5-year-old they brought from Africa, and that 5-year-old is now, in my situation, 29, maybe getting to 29 years old. So much has changed for them, for the parents. So I want us to explore, because we are trying to escape from conflicting situations across the generations. So let us interrogate, therefore, in this change process, which goes different directions, one for children and one for adults. How can we make this change process, this assimilation process, how can we make it mutually beneficial?
And that is where many cultures like our own, it's not just the Zimbabwean culture. So I don't want to make it seem like it's just a Zimbabwean culture.
No, it's not. They are Chinese in this environment. They are people from Mexico and other places in the Latin world, and they are people from Japan. They are, so I do appreciate, and even from other parts of Europe. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. So for us culturally, the relationship that we have with our parents traditionally is usually quite distant comparatively to the one that we have here. And I think it's one of those things where we need to realize our situation. We need to realize that we're in a different world. So when it comes to children, right? I'll speak it from the children's perspective. We have to understand it is unnatural for our parents to be as close to us, right? And and as affectionate as the parents of people who grew up in the Western world. It is not in their nature to do so.
Yep.
So we have to be understanding of that. And as parents, I think they have to understand that their children grew up here. They need that affection. They need to be close to their parents, specifically because there are so many things out there that can affect us, that can change the way we live, that can make things so much worse for us or better, right? And this world, our parents left and came to the diaspora so we can have a better life. So we don't have to look forward to a world where poverty is a very real thing, right? And so I would challenge parents that the more you understand your children, the more you have a close relationship with your children, the more you build that value system, because the world is going to mold them. But when they have a certain value system, they won't get thrown over here and thrown over there. No, they'll stay. They have a center. So it is important that as parents you stay close to your children. So then that value system is strong. And as children, it's important for us, right, that we yearn to have a relationship with our parents.
Well, actually, I think
Yeah.
you're moving that direction. I think we want to go, which is I would like for you, because I think from what I'm hearing from you, it's
Mm.
hard work.
Yeah, it's not easy. No, it's not
Hard
easy at
work.
all. Yes.
What part? I want to talk for parents and adults and whatever. What part in this hard work? What is your part as younger people?
What is our part? Our part as young people is to not just simply be complacent, right? It's so easy to be like, you know what? Those old people, they'll never understand me.
I'm saying this, Lee,
You know?
because young
Yeah.
people are the ones who are always accusing the adults. And I'm going to
Yeah.
acknowledge our part of the game, but I want to hear you. What must you do? Because we are interrogating ways and means and methods, whatever we can do for this change not to drown us, but
Yes.
for it to be mutually beneficial. We have
For it to build us.
we have both considered that this is hard work. What is the hard work for you, if you were speaking for people of your age and those younger?
Yeah. So for people who are my age who are watching this right now, the conversation, believe it or not, the conversation I'm having with you right now, my uncle, right, is not something a lot of people, it's not a kind of conversation a lot of kids are having with their parents.
Yes.
Not because, and it sometimes isn't because their parents don't want to. It was we just are complacent. We have this belief that you guys cannot understand us. There's no way you can, right? And we need to do the work to explain ourselves. And it can be difficult. Like you're saying, it's hard work. It is not easy. It's not easy for me to go up to my mother and say, Mama, you don't understand me.
Yeah.
You don't understand what I'm going through. You don't understand how I feel in this situation. That's not easy, right? And it's easy to be complacent and just say, you know what? They just can't understand me, right? So it's about do the work to have that connection with your parents. Because, you might not see the benefits of it right now, but you'll see it 30 years down the line when you're talking to your parents and you say, you know what, I'm glad you gave me that value system, because the values we learn, here's something that's very much true. Immigrants come here to the diaspora and they do far better than people who grew up here. Why? Why is that? It's the value systems, right? So these value systems
and
have
it's
so much worth.
It's even better when it's a shared value system.
Yeah. Exactly. These value systems have worth. And as kids, we shouldn't just throw them away or just assume it's unimportant to us, because that importance builds us even in this world, this new world that is different from the one they understood. Their values are efficient. They are functional in this world, and they're something that we need to have in order to be successful.
I'm thinking of times when maybe I have said to my children, can't you just walk? This is a minute walk to school. And I go further to say, I used to walk a few miles to school and back. I used to go without the shoes, and you want me to drop you. You want to. That's where the conflict begins to grow, because the child he has never seen or experienced or have been part of that lack ever.
Mm-hmm.
So, are you patient to hear what we went through before we migrated? So, for you and your peers, are you only thinking about, you don't understand us, but do you also have the compassion and the grace, right?
Mm-hmm.
To go into our experience before we migrated?
It depends. And when I say it depends, you can tell me that you walked, through the grass, you walked 10 kilometers to school every single day. I
Without
don't, that's
breakfast.
not real to me,
Yeah.
And I don't mean that in a mean way, right? It's just
Understand.
it's not something that is, that affects my life.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult for me to piece that together. Like, I can take the bus, you know what I mean? I can take a car. So
Yeah.
there are important lessons within these stories that we can take in, right? And I think those lessons can be learned, but I think sometimes they need to be explained in ways different from I had to walk like this. You guys don't even know. We had to do this. You guys don't even understand. It was hard like this. We used to eat sazanema zai, which is my favorite meal anyways. You guys don't understand, right? For me, people say that's a struggle meal. That's not a struggle meal. That's my favorite meal in the entire world. You know what I mean? Yeah.
But there's a choice.
So you're telling me that's struggle. I'm like, man, that's what I love that. So part of it is about, we speak different languages. And by different languages, I mean, because we come from different worlds. But it's about trying to find, okay, how do I connect this in a way that he can understand it, in a way that she can understand it. I wouldn't explain to my father. I wouldn't say, hey, I played this basketball game and it taught me these lessons about whatever. No, because for him, he's like, look, I learned that lesson in other ways, right? But I think being direct is also important. So if you want your kids to learn a certain lesson, instead of, it can seem like ridicule to say that I grew up this way, you guys have it easy. But there are other ways of saying it. It's not what you say, it's how you say it, right? And if you say it in a way that connects with the person you're saying it to, it'll have a far deeper effect.
So here's what I'm hearing from you. It should not be a competing struggle, right?
Yeah.
Parents trying to say, we suffered to get to this place.
Yeah.
And children saying, we don't know about it. Do you want us to experience that so we understand you? So what I'm hearing is that this should not be like competing forces, competing for the space to say you must understand us, So the real deal here is, let us put it this way. It's opportunity. There's an amazing opportunity that if we miss it, we break it. The opportunity here is that of mentoring on the part of parents. So like I said, I have to say what we parents can do. Number one, we have to step, even if it's an uncomfortable zone, we have to step into it because we have made the choice to migrate and therefore assimilate. I think the word we could choose instead of assimilate is integrate. We do have to integrate. We do have to go into a cultural immersion. Acknowledge the differences, and I know this is unpopular with many parents, but many parents who come from Zimbabwe, even if they're in a huge city, huge metro, they would still only look for and identify people from Zimbabwe. When they need a job, they go to a Zimbabwean. When they need a church, they look for a Zimbabwean church. When they need a store to buy food, they look for a Zimbabwean. So it's difficult, and I am saying this because I know that sometimes we have to make different meals to put on the table. Meals, a meal for the parents, because they can't go for days without sadza, and then a meal for the children, and church for the parents, church for the children, because then maybe the children are taken to a church where they have no clue what is being said. Even if it's been preached in English, sometimes the imagery that is being used is Zimbabwean. And therefore, like we said, language is an important factor here. So I think as parents, number one, we have to understand and appreciate the culture that we have immersed ourselves into. It doesn't mean that immersion must cause you to forget about your culture.
Absolutely. Sorry, I don't want to like cut in there, but I think you brought in something very important, and that is, as children, sometimes we feel like the way to integrate into society is by pushing away parts of our identity, and it's not the best way of doing so, because what happens is you live in a consistent world of conflict in your own mind, because you'll never not be a Zimbabwean child. That'll never happen.
No, you can,
right?
You cannot not be a Zimbabwean.
Yeah, it won't happen. So I think it's important for us. Let's say our parents put a meal in front of us. Let's say it's sadza. It's important for us to attempt to eat it, to try, because by doing so, you're actually attempting to understand yourself. So, or you might be like, oh, I go to the Zimbabwean church, I don't feel it, but by just going, it is an attempt. See it as an attempt to understand who you are, and if you see it that way, you'll actually grow. Which is like when you were saying before, Lee, are you in crisis? And I said, and that's why I always like to say there is no crisis anymore.
Yeah,
because I am Lee, right? And Lee is comfortable with being Lee. He will never be 100% Zimbabwean, and he'll never be 100% North American. And that's fine. It's okay. But I don't have to push away one side or the other for me to understand myself, right? That is conflict. And it's better off to just accept who you are. Accept what has built you, the things that make up who you are, because that way you live in a world of understanding instead of a consistent fight within your own mind.
Some things have to give. Some things have to give. And for us, migrant parents, there are some things that have to give. I do not have to say, because I was raised by this way, it's gotta be this way. And again, best way you can think about, when I talk about cultural immersion, you can be thinking about an anthropological process in which someone goes to study a different culture and live, eat, pray with them, do cultural events. Maybe let's say that someone from America goes into an African context to live with them every day. And I know several who lived with us as missionaries from America. But whenever they go back into their environment, they did not have to bring everything. So I am saying our daily interactions and transactions as parents in our work situation, in our other situations, we must use those opportunities to learn. So the point I'm trying to bring is that's why I tried to change into integration from assimilation. Integration allows you to offer what you can share from your culture, but it also allows you to learn from another culture. So what I was saying earlier was that parents must not refuse or resist opportunities to learn from other cultures, and especially the culture of the place they have decided to relocate. So that's our part there. And we have, so we can use our lessons to even provide the mentoring and guidance and everything. If I wanted to do everything I learned from my parents, they didn't come to my ball games. It wasn't important for them. And but do you realize that being present, you talked earlier about how not close the Zimbabwean culture is to children. They love their children, but they're not so close to them. But this is what they are learning, and they use that learning process to give back. And number two, we can also learn back from the children. I told you about how I learn from my children culturally. So that is mentoring and reverse mentoring all at the same time. So I took a very long time because I wanted to put that whole process across. And what will be your response?
Yeah. What makes these diaspora societies so great, what makes them so enriching, is that really it's not just a single culture, right? It's all of these different people who come from different places around the world. From so many different places around the world. And maybe they grew up here, but their parents came from somewhere else, or their grandparents, or their great-great-grandparents, right? And when all these cultures come together and they mold, they create these great societies we get to live in. So what you were saying when you're saying integration is important. Absolutely. Because there is something as a Zimbabwean that I have to give to North America that is important, right? That is of worth to the people around me. And there's so much worth within the society that I need to also take in internally in myself. So it's important that when parents look at their children, don't ridicule them because they're not like you. What they are is there's somebody who grew up in a society of so many different people, different types of people, and that is an enriching experience that has built them to be who they are. And also, as children, we need to remember not to forget where we come from, not to forget our homeland. As people who have had this opportunity of being enriched by the diaspora, we need to give back to our home, to our community. We need to find ways to do so, because there's something we can give to them that they can't experience. And there's something, those virtues that we grew up, that our parents taught us. We can take those virtues and the lessons we learn here and build back home. So there's so much, this conversation can go on forever, but there's really so much that can grow us and build us as people. And I think, and I haven't had the experience yet of being a parent and learning from my kids, and I can't wait for that experience. It's really going to be something.
Well, soon and
that'll
very
be amazing
soon.
when I get there.
Soon and
I don't
very
know how
soon.
soon.
Praying for you.
I don't know how soon, but like
for you to be a
Yeah.
parent, that will work out. I think that we have exemplified what we are talking about here, because I am learning from you. That's the reverse mentoring we are talking about. I am learning from you. There is so much I can learn from you. There's so much I can learn from my children. So if we make it a symbiotic relationship where we learn from each other, so intergenerational conflicts may result when there's a breakdown. But I think from what we are talking about, and I know that Monica is in the background and probably collecting some feedback. And I would love to hear what feedback, if there's any. Is there any feedback? If Monica, you can hear from us from wherever you are, we would like to hear what kind of feedback, even your comment, from what we have said. We have started with a definition process, and we have started to build it to define now and differentiate the group. We haven't gone much deeper into further defining the groups of children from migrant parents and what those differences hold. But we have focused more on parents and children, and I think it's relevant.
Mhm.
I think it's critical. I think it's necessary. We need to start this conversation going, so parents and their children, their relationships will not be broken in the process. Because this conflict, if each side starts digging in,
Mhm.
parents, they say you don't understand us. Children say you don't understand us. It results in dysfunctionality
Mhm.
within families. And therefore, the parent continued to treat the child who came into the diaspora as a 5-year-old. They still treat them as a 5-year-old. So we want to hear, I think we lost Monica there. We want to hear what that kind of feedback has been. Are you there, Monica?
I'm here. The feedback that I have here, there is a statement that there has to be willingness to learn from each other. So both sides have to be willing to learn from each other. But listening to the discussion, I learned so much, and I enjoyed hearing your contributions, both of you. This is a topic which is very broad, and we might need to come back again and talk about that, because we only talked about the side where the child or the children are in the diaspora and they are working through their own relationships, the relationships with themselves, the relationship with the outside world, and the relationship that they have with their parents, and kind of coming together and trying to understand what makes it work. I like the point that you said, Lee, that parents need to be aware that if they do not try to understand their child and try to enable their child to fit into where they are, because these are different cultures.
Mhm.
The child will go outside and find someone else or something else to mentor them. And that is huge, because this is where parents are turning around and saying, I have lost control. I don't know what to do. It is because there hasn't been that that understanding. Because when we were growing up, you were not able to give your side of the story. Even if somebody came home and they accused you of something, you were not going to say, but what? You are not speaking. I am the parent, and so I speak and say what I want. And the parent will say what they want, and the child would not say anything. And now, as adults, we are finding that it is difficult to express ourselves because we were shut down when we were trying to say, you know what, it's not me, or this is how I see it, or this is how I feel. We're not supposed to have feelings. We're not supposed to have opinions. We're not supposed to just bring anything. You're just gonna listen, receive what you receive. And this is where now it is difficult for the parents to unlearn what they learned from their own parents, as because they will look at themselves and say, well, this is how it happened, and I turned out all right. So why can't you listen to me? Why can't I raise you in the same way that I was raised? Because I turned out good. I have a good job. I have a family. I have this and that. And so that model works. But that model doesn't work anymore.
And therefore, you have a situation where the parent learned how not to answer or push back against what the parents are saying, or saying, justify. You do not talk when parents are talking. That's the parent there. And now they have a child who talks back. And it's quite an issue there that
No, yes,
you know, and the parent can't do anything anyway.
not only does the child talk back, the child is also learning from TV and programs to turn around and say, I hate you. I hate this. The child is also learning that you can slam the door.
Have you seen on YouTube there's a there's a conversation between an adult woman, whether it's mother or not, and a small child. The mother, if it's the mother's name is Linda, and the child is Linda, listen.
Yes.
Linda, listen. So this is a child pushing against what the mother is trying to say, and it's a competition of attention, and therefore a question of right now who has the right to be listened to.
Mm-hmm.
It's a part of it also is right. I think something that as children forget at times is the way you guys were raised, when you said that children didn't really speak out as much or at all, actually, and you didn't have that freedom to speak, right? It's different, right? You guys grew up in a world where poverty isn't far away. It's not something where you say, look at that poor person on the road. It can be you.
Yep.
You maybe grew up in poverty, or your parents can actually see how close they were to poverty, right? And so they want to raise you to be hard, to be strong people. But here we have rights and freedoms. Right? So then we go to school and they tell us, oh, you have this right, you have this freedom, you have this right, you have this freedom. You're like, yo, you can't speak to me like that. You know, and it's because for us, struggle isn't something that is so close to us. So then we have no need for this super strong, super strict worldview, because the world we live in isn't like that. The world we live in is far more malleable, and it's far more. There are so many different places somebody can end up that are still quite okay, right? So it's just a lack of understanding. And as kids, we need to understand where our parents came from and understand what that world looked like, right? For me, a lot of it was looking back and seeing what was Zimbabwe like in the 70s and the 80s. And then I see and I'm like, yeah, and no wonder, you know, how can I be mad at somebody who grew up in that world and had to grow up in a certain way, right? So I can't. So a lot of it is a lack of understanding from both sides of where people are coming from.
And I think with Monica back here, when I see her back, I know our time is up, and I always say we gotta bring this to a logical conclusion. But how do you conclude it? Like she said, we will need to narrow this down and take it good bite sizes at each time. And I just think that we can feather this. I feel very comfortable talking to you because you're my nephew, and I am learning from you. And I think because you, as my nephew, and me as your uncle, being open about this, and we are not joking, this is real life. I think this level of openness must go further. We must promote this dialogue, because the absence of this dialogue and the failure to find each other, relationships, instead of growing, they're exploding into something else. We want to promote healthy intergenerational relationships. We want to think about what it means to be raising family in an environment that is very strange to you. And Lee, there's even a group we must consider in the future. There's a group of kids who are not in the diaspora, but parents are in the diaspora. And you know what? During our recent conference, we talked about the element of drug, the problem, the crisis of drug abuse, and related problems. And we also have children who are here in the diaspora, and parents are home. So there are many dynamics and facets and areas through which we can focus. So we want to come back. I think I have, by way of this, I'm giving my closing, remarks, and I'm gonna ask Lee to give his own closing remarks, and then I know Monica will wind this down.
Yes, I think we've said a lot, and like I said, there's so many conversations we can have, and I hope we can have so many more conversations like this in the future. I would like to really thank you, Monica, and really thank you for this platform, for South TV. My uncle and I have been having these conversations a long time, you know, and a part of when people see, whether it is the podcast that I'm a part of or when I speak in different places, people are like, oh, how did you end up thinking this way? And it's because I had people like my uncle who were open to have conversations like this. And it's amazing to find to have a platform where we can have these conversations in this type of way. And you know, I just, like I said, I just like to thank you, and I really appreciate you, Monica, for this platform, because I'm happy that these conversations can go out and the world can hear them, and just that piece. So I appreciate it a lot.
Thank you so much. It's good to have these conversations. That's why we created South TV, so that we talk about social issues, issues that affect us in the diaspora, but also issues that affect people at home, because we want to bridge that gap. There is no them and us. We are one and the same, and we have to pick the best from both worlds and marry them, so that our quality of life is improved. There's so much that we can get from our own culture, and there's also so much that we can get from the cultures here in the diaspora, but also reminding each other of what one generation could be missing if certain things don't happen, or where we can all come together and heal when relationships have been affected because of distance. And I like that we will be talking about the parents who are here when kids are at home, and there's just so much to talk about there. Also to talk about the experience of the children who are born or even raised in the diaspora, what happens, how they feel when they go home. And, you know, there is that, unless the family has worked really hard to make sure that the cousins and the nephews at least know each other. They meet each other and they're total strangers. And so we need to talk about that and the importance of having that connection. Because when life happens, and the only people that the child here in the diaspora know, if something happens to them and they are gone, it is quite possible for the child to be lonely when they actually have a loving family back home.
Yeah.
But because they were never given a chance to get to know them, they then struggle to build that relationship on their own without the parents present. So thank you so much. I look forward to the other chapters of this discussion. And thank you, Spiwe and Auntie Fabi and other viewers. We look forward to having you back here on South TV, where we'll be talking about intergenerational relationships. On Sunday, we'll be talking about the challenges of albinism, the challenges that people with albino face in our culture and in Africa when they go to other countries. Thank you so much. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.